Welcome to Idea Shell on part 17 of SQL video series. I am Ganesh. In our previous video, we have started the constraints and covered the unique, not null, check and default constraints. And in this video, we will cover the remaining constraints, that is primary key and foreign key constraints. First, let's see what is primary key constraint. I have dropped this employee table. Let's say I am setting this ID field as primary key. Let's execute this. Commands completed successfully. Let's understand what we have done so far. We have set ID as primary key field, meaning only unique values can be stored in this field. But if you ask how it differs from unique constraint, unique allow null values, whereas primary key will not allow any null values. Currently, we do not have any records in employee table. I am inserting this Jerry record as my first record. It is inserted. Now I am trying to insert the mini record with the employee ID as again E1. Let's try to insert and see the result. It returned this error, violation of primary key constraint, cannot insert duplicate key in object employee. Duplicate key value is E1. This is very clearly saying we cannot allow duplicates. Now let's discuss about foreign key. Before we start, let's create one more table. I'm opening a new window here. If you can recollect, we have discussed about a table called the gender in our part 2 of the SQL video series. Let's create the table over here. For the benefit of the time, I have already created the query for this. This says the table name is gender and the fields are gender type and gender name, and I am setting the gender type field as primary key. Whereas in gender name field, I am going to store the data, that is male and female. Let's execute this query. A table is now created. I have also prepared the insert statements already. So M for male and F for female. Execution completed. Let's run the select statement on this gender table. Okay, now let's come to foreign key. If you look at this employee table, if suppose I am setting that gender type field as a foreign key, I can do that only when this gender type field acts as a primary key in a different table. So why do we have this restriction is, while we are defining a foreign key, let's say if I am defining gender type as a foreign key, while defining it, I must specify in which table this gender type field is acting as a primary key. Only then we will be able to create a foreign key constraint. So if we want to create a foreign key on any of the field, then that particular field should be set as a primary key in a different table. Let's see the practical implementation of it. Again, I am dropping this employee table. So now we are going to recreate this employee table. Let the primary key, unique, let them be as it is. Let the check constraint in gender type field also be there. So now I am going to declare this gender type field as a foreign key field. Foreign key references. We need to specify the table where this gender type field is a primary key on the table. So gender is the table where I have this gender type as primary key. So I am giving the table name as gender over here and within brackets the primary key field, which is gender type. I'm bringing this to the next line for better readability. Let's execute this query. Commands completed successfully. You can ask like why this gender is displaying in red. This is because we have created this gender table after we connected to the database and opened the connection. Since there were no gender table when we opened this connection or this query window, this gender table is not stored in SQL Server Management Studio's memory, and hence it is displaying in red. But when we executed, this query will hit the database, and in database we have this table gender. And since the table is present in the database, this query executed without issues, and we are seeing the result as commands completed successfully. Okay, this employee table's gender type field is related to the gender type field of the gender table. So how we can verify whether this relation is really existing or not? To verify that, let's insert this Jerry record first. Usually when we insert any employee record, for the gender type field, we have inserted either M or F. Let's say if I am inserting something like G. Please don't ask what is G. G has no interpretation and I am simply writing it. Let's execute this. It says the insert statement conflicted with the check constraint. Constraint name they have specified. The conflict occurred in database iShell and table employee and column gender type. This is saying the error is due to check constraint. So this is because we have already set up a constraint called check for verifying whether the values are M or F. So that's why we are getting this error. So what we can do is, let's again drop this table and let's remove this check constraint so that we can demo the foreign key constraint. Now we have only foreign key constraint. Let's create this table. Table is now created. So if I try to insert this record, I should not get that check constraint error. Let's execute this and see. I'm executing it. Okay. Now we haven't get that check constraint error. Insert statement conflicted with the foreign key constraint. Constraint name. So this constraint name we haven't created. SQL Server by itself will create a constraint name for it. So we don't need to worry about the name of the constraint. So the purpose of this foreign key constraint is we cannot insert any kind of data on a foreign key constraint field. We can only insert the data in the foreign key field only if the data is present in a reference field on a reference table. So what we have achieved over here is we are restricting the data that can be inserted into this gender type field. And the benefit of this foreign key constraint is I tried inserting a value as M which has no meaning. Since as we have declared this gender type field as foreign key, it prevents us in entering the junk data. Okay. So far we have created constraints by dropping the table and then recreating the entire table. But now let's see how to add constraint to an existing table. I have already written a query for this. If you look at this query, alter table, the employee table which we are going to alter it. Here we are specifying that we are going to add constraint. And the constraint name, check employee age. Any meaningful name we can give here. So what I want this constraint to do is, I want to check the age field and the value should be greater than 22. Which means when someone enters the data in the age field, I want the data to be validated whether the age is greater than 22 or not. And only if it is greater than 22, it can be allowed to be inserted. Let's execute this query. Let's insert this mini record in the employee table. And we can give the age as, let's say 21, so that it will be less than 22. Let's execute this query. Okay. We have an error received. The insert statement conflicted with the check constraint. Constraint name. Conflict occurred in database iShell. So this error is expected. Let's see how it behaves if we give the age as 22. So even for 22, we are getting the same error because we have given the condition as the age should be greater than 22. But in this case, it is equal to 22. So again, we are getting this error. Let's give 23 and execute it. Okay, one row affected. Let's select this employee table and see the result. Okay, we are able to insert the record successfully. Let's also verify this one more time in the UAE as well. I've been using the SQL Server Management Studio's functionality. So I'm selecting the table and right clicking it and hitting the refresh. Any of the refresh button is absolutely fine. I'm expanding constraints and we could see the constraint check emp age is existing. So this is how we can add constraints when a table is already existing. With this, we have covered all the concepts related to constraints. And if you find this video useful, I suggest you to share this with your friends and colleagues. Closing it for now. Thank you.